Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Don Robinson. Welcome to the April 2020 edition of SMAdvancedForum, or SMAF for short. As always, I'm joined in the studio by my erstwhile colleagues, guests, and co-hosts. And we're trying to do things using that trendiest of all things, Zoom, this month. So slightly different technology. Let's see if it works. Anyway, with no further ado, oh look, he's got married. So who's up this week? Come on, Tim, say hello. Let's see if the system will switch to you.
In honor not only of International Women's Day, but the beginning of spring, Michelle and I had a bit of a eventful wedding. Is that the right way to say it?
That's to say the least.
Yeah, we ended up with 11 people in attendance and 100
from 155.
Yeah, and then 120 that watched live, including you, Dom, and Eric, and others. And in fact, Dom, you and
thank you all for that too.
Your better half sent that lovely picture of you watching on a computer with champagne or prosecco or something.
I couldn't think of anyone more appropriate to be the first person I watched getting married over a streaming link. So, yay! A little round of applause.
Thank you very much. So that was sort of the eventful part for us. You know, ultimately we'll have a reception in God knows when. We would have said June, now July, August, September, sometime.
October.
And as I understand, we also have Mark East out here. Mark, did you you just join in?
I did. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you. Now, you have your hands full too, and it's I at least have a new 5- and 7-year-old daughter. You have a number of much younger, as I understand.
Yes, indeed. A mere few weeks. Yeah, they're about 10 weeks old this week. So
I have to say the twins' bedroom is looking very impressive.
Oh, interesting. It keys out the screen. I was going to show you my baby monitor, but it's keying it out.
Oh,
that's
nice.
Interesting. Who knows?
Mark, so how was that change? Mark, you know, we left this 2 months ago. Last month was International Women's Day, and of course we weren't on for that. And between that period of time, Michelle and I got married. You now have the 2 little ones. How has your life changed? You know, forget COVID. Just tell us about it.
forget COVID. Yeah, I mean, life is business as usual. I've been, working from home for, I don't know, 20 years. So yeah, things are exactly the same as they were. I haven't really left the house in 2 months anyway because of the babies. So
it's a little bit more hectic.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But
and then we have from the cold climes of Wisconsin, somebody who was first going to fly down for the wedding and then was going to drive, and we finally said, Eric, you know what? Just stay in Wisconsin.
Yep.
Is there snow on the ground up there? Are you allowed to go outside? How does all this work?
Y'all really overestimate just how cold it stays in Wisconsin. It's about 60 degrees, about 55 today, nice and sunny. That doesn't mean we're not going to get snow next week, but it's looking good now. So we're getting outside when we can, socially distanced, of course, and making the best of it.
Awesome. Very good. And speaking of International Women's Day, we've got one of our guests here from Women in Streaming Media, Alesandra Madurowicz. Did I say that right, Alesandra?
You did.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so I'm Alesandra. I am Zype's Director of Business Development. Zype is an API-first video infrastructure for digital video.
Writing's not that.
Oh, somebody's playing something on their stream somewhere.
Eric's trying to get in his episodes of Tiger King while he can.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, Alessandra, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was just saying that Zype's an API first infrastructure for digital video. So we provide an end-to-end solution to build video products and streaming services. Headquartered in New York, I happen to be out in California for the remainder of this quarantine, and looking forward to being up on this podcast.
Awesome, very good. And then Richard, you've got a lovely background behind you, which I'm assuming is not real, but if it is real, I'm very impressed. Where are you based?
I'm based in Atlanta, the metro area of Atlanta, and no, this is actually really Atlanta behind me. No, it's not. I went and looked at.
I see the west. I see the Westin over your shoulder. The classic.
Easy to recognize with the buildings. You bet. And the weather is just about this good today. It actually is blue sky and maybe 70 degrees. So we've got the windows open, and but certainly the live set background makes it look a little more professional than the usual, probably, I don't know, China cabinet or that type of work from home background.
Ultimately, Richard, have had some of the best in the last 2 years. I think the best by far was Dan Rayburn, who put what looked like moving blankets over windows. I think there was a bit of a joke that it looked like an Al Qaeda training camp, but then we've had. Well, I think that Dan was
SMAF again.
He was dressed in black and doing it vertically, and then we've had people's, blinds, and also, yes, your background by far is one of the more impressive ones we've had.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Tell us about your company as well.
I'm the CEO of Streaming Global. Streaming Global is an innovative technology company in the streaming space. We actually invented a way to deliver live linear broadcast or on-demand streams using nothing other than cloud storage servers. So a more modern pipeline, if you will, for what the internet is becoming every day, and a little less about colo facilities for your own hardware.
Sure.
But it covers the end-to-end pipeline over the cloud, which surprisingly is a lot faster and a lot less expensive for delivering high quality streams.
We'll come back to that topic in a couple minutes here. Dom, what have you been up to? Well, I think you helped in the background on International Women's Day last month, if I remember, but in the last 2 months, what have you been sort of focused on?
Yeah, so the ladies locked me in the cupboard, but I took my laptop with me and ran the stream from the cupboard, and seemed to go all right, which is pretty good. I think much of, because we were a day or so into the lockdown starting in Europe and pending in UK, US, and so on. So the world was a different place 4 weeks ago. But I think the one thing that's absolutely soaked my time in the last sort of 10 days. I don't know if you guys saw, but we made the BBC News with my hobby internet radio show, which actually Eric DJ's on as well, I hasten to add. And of course, I think Tim's been on there as a guest as well, but for 8 years now or something, on Thursday nights, I've been spending my evenings like a lonely geek, hiding in a room, partying with a bunch of people all over the world, and getting thoroughly drunk, playing music at each other, which 4 weeks ago was a thoroughly lonely experience and limited to just a niche group of geeks. But last Saturday we had nearly 1,000 people join the stream in the first 5 minutes, and it's just absolutely exploded around us. We've kind of gone 5 nights a week rather than just Thursdays. Wow. And we've been having huge audiences, and the BBC, RTL, some Australian, some US networks picked up on it and running little articles about how people are entertaining each other during COVID. And we happen to be the zeitgeist of the Zoom party, or the isolation party, as we called it. So I've gone from 0 to not quite black belt, because I haven't played with the Zoom API yet, but I've gone from 0 to blue belt on Zoom integration in the space of about 10 days. And it's a good tool. It's an interesting tool. I'm sure it's going to come back into the discussion in a minute or two.
So I had a question about the person dressed up as the waffle, because the BBC reporter said dressing as a waffle is optional, and I had to stop it and show Michelle. What is that? Someone you know, or is that just someone at random?
No. So it's a public. We're inviting Zoom. What do they call it? Zoom bombers. So it's a public open Zoom room, but it's forced mute. So because we're streaming the video on YouTube, so people who are waiting to get into the Zoom room, which only has 100 capacity, can watch the live stream on the radio show's website. And we were putting up gallery mode, and people were starting to get, have a few beers and start dressing up. So we started using Zoom to vision direct and bring people to the foreground, and then people did start dressing in sillier and sillier things, and somebody dressed up as a waffle. So they made out that it wasn't obligatory to dress as a waffle, but there was a superwoman. There was some people doing something which we had to ban. There was all sorts of crazy stuff on there. So yeah, it's a hobby that's become a bit like running a virtual nightclub for the last 2 weeks. I've been going to bed at 2:30 and starting again at 7:30. So a little bit jaded. So I'm on tonight, so tune in if you want.
Let's talk about the ban thing real quick, because obviously with TV, we have that 8-second dump model. With video conferencing, which Zoom is, you don't necessarily have that. is there a way that you can pre-screen people before they come on, or how?
No, what we've been doing is we've been flicking between the gallery. We worked out a way to flick between a gallery view and a spotlight view, which is like we're using here, full screen speakers. In gallery mode, we're sort of the chap who's helping me, DJ Gadget, who's helping me vision mix and so on. He and I have got quite fast eyes, so we can scan quickly over the gallery. And if one of the thumbnails is inappropriate, we just grab something else and go full screen quickly. And then in our own gallery mode, we can shut them off, or we can just, jump to something else quickly. But you have to be quick. Some of this stuff was getting a bit risque on Saturday night last week. So yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting. All right, Eric, yours is probably not nearly as interesting what you've been working on in the last 2 months, but bring us up.
Oh, don't do that. He's doing wondrous work promoting our industry, dude. He keeps us all in a living.
Well, maybe Eric's been dressing up as a waffle. We just don't know it. Who knows?
The only time I take the waffle costume off is when I do SMAF once a month. Oh yeah, at Streaming Media, we've been writing a lot about how this is transforming the industry, and that's what we're going to be talking about, I think, for the next hour. In fact, as I look at the list of potential topics for today's conversation, pretty much every one of them comes back to how this current crisis is changing our world and our industry in particular, both short-term and long-term.
And I know Dom wrote an article on sort of virtual meetings, and it was posted and did well. And then you ran a survey here recently. That's completed. Has that output been put out, or do you have any sort of snippets just to share with us?
No, I mean, we did a survey on Streaming Media asking people what their plans were for virtual events. And, unsurprisingly, I think 91% of the people who responded said they were planning to do at least one virtual event, whether that's a webinar, a virtual conference, in the next 6 months. Most people said they're planning to do 2 to 5 events in the next 6 months. We're going to be putting the full report out soon. We're figuring out the best way to put that out, but it should be available in the next week or so. So yeah, clearly, and I think, Richard, you mentioned, your company's getting, any companies that is working even remotely in the virtual event or video space is insanely busy right now.
Yeah, Richard, talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned 90% of the calls are about virtual meetings, virtual calls.
Yeah, I can confirm it was. I didn't need to watch the news to know when the lockdown started to happen. It was almost overnight that we all of a sudden the phone was ringing off the hook from a lot of different business categories that we might not have been doing business with weeks prior. Almost immediately, as examples, some really big church groups, faith organizations, where all of a sudden all of the parishioners are going to be watching remotely. It becomes, it's 5,000, 10,000% increase in remote viewing. They were not ready for that. Nobody could be on something like that. So the services crumbled on that first Sunday, with everybody just watching from home. So it was about scale, and something that we were definitely, a technology provider like us was open to. Well, let's see, how can we help without, you don't have the time to go replace all the infrastructure or to rebuild, $1 million installation. So you have to be able to be flexible and adaptable. At the same time, online performances, concerts were being canceled, venues and anything with groups is being canceled. But that doesn't remove the need for artists to be able to connect with their fan base, or for the fans to feel connected in a time when everybody's in isolation. Remote connection is such an important part of keeping all of our sanity during this lockdown period. So I've been amazed by the number of artists across multiple genres that are starting to reach out and want to do performances, from their living room, from their kitchen, from wherever they are, from the pool deck in the back. But just to maintain that connection. And we're seeing, surprisingly, while advertising, is clearly being hit by the lack of sports. Who knew we'd ever wake up in a day where there's no sports? But that's been an awkward thing. It's very sad on the weekends, obviously, but it really impacts advertisers, and we're seeing not just ad-based but sponsorship-based events become a much bigger thing. They've always been there, but now it's one of the few ways to connect brands with the consumers at the same time that they're connecting with the artist or the performance that they want to see. So yeah, it's certainly changed our business, and we're adapting rapidly to help where we can.
I just wanted to chip in. Sorry, Tim. I just wanted to chip in there. Did you guys see the announcement that Metallica are going to be doing a live set every Monday online? And I'm glad you pulled that expression, and I think Mark might have done as well. Those of you who've been streaming a while, do you remember what was happening in 1999, 2000? Yeah, Tim's nodding.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Metallica wanted the internet turned off to save the music industry. They thought that Napster and everything to do with the internet was the absolute end of the future of everything. And now, I think it's $15 a go to watch them online or something. So there you go. I shall be boycotting them.
Well put.
Well, and we'll actually, I want to come back to Mark and ask some questions on that too, because I also remember back to the Rolling Stones tour. But before I go to Alesandra and get sort of feedback on what level of interest you're getting with virtual and like that, I want to say something, Richard, to your point about the houses of worship. There's a blog post I have about 5 minutes ago. They sent me an email while we're in the middle of this, talking specifically to that topic about houses of worship. And what's interesting is Pew did research here in the US and said 51% of those who would normally attend services aren't attending, but now 59% who may have nominally gone are actually watching services on Sunday as well. So, or Saturday, based on what your religion is. So it's clear that on the weekends is actually becoming sort of an event model as well.
And anyone who goes to church regularly or even periodically knows there's two big days in the year, and it's Christmas and it's Easter. Easter's coming quickly. That is, not to mix analogies here, but that's the Super Bowl for churches. So for remote viewing, that's going to be a big day for streaming technologies.
And the number one piece of feedback I got as I wrote that blog post was that churches are scared to death that when they use music that they have CCLI licenses for, that they will get taken down off Facebook, not just the stream, but their entire page. And they're scared that the same thing will happen on YouTube with YouTube Live and their YouTube channels. A number of the licensing agencies in that world up through Easter have taken their aren't doing DCMAs, but still we're hearing stories of churches getting their streams taken down because they're playing music that they have copyright licenses to, and yet the algorithms on YouTube and Facebook haven't seemed to have caught up with them.
I was just going to say, I can imagine the algorithms for auto takedowns having caught up with this new usage just in the last few weeks.
Just to chip in on that, actually, for the Thursday night show live streams, obviously we're PRS licensed. Over here we have PRS MCPS for UK licensing. We've got a license. There is no way to tell YouTube or Facebook that we are broadcasting legally on the internet. So there is absolutely nothing we can do to get a live stream with audio running on the internet. As we introduce these Zoom parties using YouTube to deliver the sort of watch-only view, we had to expressly force all of the Zoom clients to mute, because what was happening in the first one we did, every now and then somebody would join and unmute their microphone, but they'd have the radio show playing in the background, and just a couple of seconds, literally just a couple of seconds of the radio would go back down their microphone channel and out through the otherwise silent YouTube stream. And within a couple of seconds, the YouTube stream would be cut off. So their algorithms are very sensitive at the moment. And it's frustrating that as a broadcaster, I can't go and enter my license details and Google can cross-check that and clear my channel for me to broadcast. I find that really frustrating.
One of the largest churches in the country, Dom, has some kids who were in my college classes. They're now working there full time. And they said that they were performing a song. Their band was performing a song live for the stream. They performed it so perfectly that the algorithm kicked in and took the stream down. And so they've had to resubmit all their documentation to YouTube, but they said there's nobody they can talk to. So, I mean,
yeah, there is no two-way on it, and it's very frustrating. I mean, my music alone, I'm surprised the algorithm works, because I'm usually mixing two or three different genres of music in a mashup format, and yet it still picks up instantly.
It's funny that you brought up that particular topic on the audio and the takedowns. It explains to me one of the things I was trying to figure out over the last 2 weeks is why so many of those organizations have been approaching us as kind of almost a bespoke technology, because we can, and we've been adapting by making just a white label solution that they can embed right into their own website and bypass these algorithms. And now it makes perfect sense to me. So I appreciate you inviting me on the podcast just to explain.
Yeah, no worries. And the other thing we're seeing is a lot of them are trying to rapidly push to do Roku or Apple TV apps, because in those cases they won't get taken down. And Alesandra, that's probably a nice segue to what you do.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in there where, YouTube, Facebook, those are really great places to multicast, potentially your content to extend the potential viewership. But these are really times that having your owned and operated platform and having, authentication walls and having your user base and protection of not being censored is really important. And maybe not censored, but those algorithms and kind of the same breadth, and having your own service, and not kind of with the unknown of the YouTube algorithm taking your live stream down or not. And we've seen similarly, Richard, overnight, influx of inbound requests of like needing help across like faith-based organizations. We've seen a huge influx with fitness. I think you could have that same conversation that we are with, any sort of groups and group fitness classes and gyms and corporations that, still need to teach classes and want to keep their doors open. And now need to have video not a part of, that's a nice thing to have to offer on-demand classes on our website, but no, this is a mandatory part of our business model from here on out.
And let me ask about that, because I worked in doing virtual events back around Y2K and 9/11, and there was a huge push in it for a couple months, and then it dropped away and we went back to business as usual. Do you think we are fundamentally at a point, because this is so prolonged, that it will be part of their business model going forward?
Yeah, without a doubt. And with all the conversations that we've had, we serve a large number of fitness customers today. And they kind of they feel like they were ahead of the curve now in the conversations with prospects who didn't have it in place, who knew they should have. They're planning on having it from here on out. I think that kind of goes across all industries. Again, I think the world that we're going to be entering is going to be a very different one after this. And I feel very fortunate to be in the streaming media industry, because we have a really big part to play on what it looks like from now on and what that user experience looks like. How can we foster human connection virtually? I think it's a big responsibility that we have.
I have to chip in. I had so many calls coming in from friends and family who got small businesses and so on, who are just trying to get their head around streaming over the last couple of weeks. I decided to corral them all into doing a webinar. So I just did a free Facebook Live or Zoom call, and invited people to come and crash and hear a bit of a streaming 101 for half an hour. I talked about how it all worked, and then do about an hour and a half of Q&A. It was actually really good, because normally I sit in front of blue chips and corporates doing that sort of thing. And this was just, there was a number of yoga teachers and people trying to reach their, deal with their music, how they do music and so on. And absolutely out of that session came the best question I've ever been asked in any forum, which was, how do I deal with my microphone when I'm standing on my head, which was from a yoga teacher. And that was actually something I've never been asked before, but brilliant.
Both you and I answered that one, Dom, because I think Adrian said to her, get a corded headset or something like that. And she's like, but that would fall off when I flip over. So we ultimately, what did we do? We recommended to her the AirPods. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been a really different, process for us, I'd say, and wanting to serve as of it is today, like how it stands today, and the fitness customers that we're serving are, larger corporations that have, thousands of locations. These are, like the individual yoga teacher who needs a solution. And so we've adapted and created an entirely new product, or piece of the product, new pricing. We have webinars every week as well to like try to just help. I think that every company in the streaming media industry right now has a responsibility to help and to help our economy and help the small business owners, and teach them kind of what our expertise is.
Very good. Hey, Mark, I want to,
if you don't mind, Tim. I think you're exactly right on that responsibility to help, and we're trying to take the same position, which is we have something that can help people stay safe, can help potentially pass this faster. Obviously, we are all in this and want it to go away as soon as possible, but there's a lot of uncertainty in where is the peak, where does it, how quickly can we unlock and come together in person again? And there's uncertainty about, does it come back in the fall? Is it a seasonal thing as part of life now? And regardless of whether we're prepared now, we're certainly going to be prepared in future outbreaks of this. I think in a much better way, not just prepared medically, but prepared in how we can adapt life and adapt work just for going through this.
And if I can interject too, I don't think it's it will be prolonged for sure, but I don't think that's the difference here. I think it really is the global aspect of it, and the fact that Tim, when you mentioned 9/11 and Y2K and those things, the Y2K was global, sure, but it was also a little overblown.
overblown.
Yeah, 9/11 was, there was a global community, if you will, but I think it was largely a U.S. thing. I think now, I mean, we're 19 years later, but we're also finding that global business is the basis of most of our social interaction in a day. And when we find out that some of the personal getting on a plane and actually shaking hands in a building stuff is not entirely necessary, I think that's where we will see a change here. We'll see people opting to do more of what we're doing right now and less of the in-person conferences. I also think the technology is far more advanced now than it was when you're talking about. So I think we will see a sea change here. There will be a big push to return to normal whenever this recedes, but I believe that we're going to see quite a large influx of business into the streaming media space in general, and I don't think that's going to go away.
Well, and I will say too, in those last 20 years, I think the number one thing that really helped was things like FaceTime and Skype, where people got used to doing that on an informal basis, and then obviously are now using it sort of in a more formal and/or broadcast model. I had a question for you, Mark. I mean, a lot of your business, you've told us before about doing Marvel movie premieres. Obviously, that kind of thing is out at this point. You do the e-gaming events. Are those kinds of events morphing to where it would be, say, 5 people in a room playing against 5 people in a room somewhere else? Or is that business just sort of dropping away for a period of time until such a point as you can gather hundreds of teams together with spectators in a large building?
Yeah, I mean, I think the esports space largely is moving. I mean, a certain segment of that space has always been based around virtual gaming. I mean, you're playing a game which is cloud-based anyway, right? So
Sure.
you don't really have to be in a room together to compete.
You don't have to do a frag test kind of thing, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the LAN party, so to speak, is not necessarily required, but I think that's what they're falling back on at this point. They're falling back on that model. And once we get back to it, you'll see the large, tournaments and that sort of thing being held. But right now, they're doing virtual tournaments, and it's a really easy pivot for them because I would say most of the esports that you see online is all virtual anyway. At this point, It's really the larger properties that are doing the in-person events because those are expensive and difficult.
And I was going to say, and I mean, a lot of your business is you roll a truck, so to speak, for a live event. Are you getting requests now for like a house of worship to go film 5 people and do a live stream, or how is it? You're the closest of all of us to field work, so how is it affecting business?
Yeah, so I mean, everything we had on the schedule for the next few months is canceled in terms of entertainment events, sports events, that type of stuff. All the things that we usually do for NAB and for E3, and that's all gone away. But it's been largely replaced by virtualized conferences and things like that. So we're in the process of working on solutions that we already had in place to a certain extent. Onaino brought on a new head of operations. I think many of you guys might know Alex Lindsay, formerly of Pixel Core. He's now with Onaino, and he brings with him a bunch of technology that we're kind of reshaping and leveraging to create a broad platform for virtual conferences and that sort of thing. And so we're seeing 2 segments of that. We're seeing the people who want to replace these small in-person meetings, but they want it to not look like a Zoom meeting. They want people to look like just add a little bit of a broadcast production value to the mix. Have people look good and sound good, and not have a lot of the communication issues and could you mute and that type of thing that happens during those meetings. So we're doing just a lot of kind of meeting management, if you will, a lot of hand holding, a lot of shipping of small kits of equipment and things like that. And then the other half of it are the large conferences, which are all in the works right now. We haven't done any of them yet because we're still pretty early at this point. But there are a number of very large conferences who want to go entirely virtual, who have to go entirely virtual if they want to do anything this year. So we're working on making those happen. Multi-room conferences that also will allow a virtual. This gets back to the article that Dom wrote. Where people want to have hallway conversations, if you will. They want to have cocktail party conversations in these environments because that's half of why you go to NAB. It's half of why you go to E3 is to run into someone at a party and have a really valuable conversation with that person, and that kind of stuff is very difficult to execute virtually. So
serendipity, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a few different platforms out there who kind of specialize in that, and they're working on it. None of them are super bulletproof, and we're working on our own. So it remains to be seen who ends up with a really great solution there. But it's been underserved. That market's been underserved traditionally. So it's kind of a race to see who's able to really effectively do it at this point.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about the advertising and subscriptions. Richard, you mentioned something about that, and Alesandra, before we got on the air, you mentioned something about it. Do you want to just talk a little bit to that from the 2 perspectives that you all have? And Alesandra, you go first, please.
Yeah, I feel really passionately about this one, honestly, because I think the conversations that I was having in the direct consumer OTT streaming space about a year ago were really owned and operated direct consumer apps and subscription. And then I'd say in the past 6 months or so, I guess after Pluto TV got acquired, I think is when things really changed. Pluto TV, Zumo, Fubo, Samsung TV Plus, all those. I saw most of our customers and prospects really wanting to have, the advertising supported streaming, and then, maybe a SVOD model as well, once that kind of proved itself out. And now with so many advertisers pulling out because, no one's like car dealerships, no one's buying cars, traveling, no one's, taking trips, all the main advertising players are pulling out their ad spend, which is then making the kind of ad-supported streaming world really difficult right now. And so the customers that do have their owned and operated platforms and subscription model or are introducing a pay-per-view model have a lot more control of and understanding of their revenue streams for now and the foreseeable future as the ad market is really out of their hands. So what it looks like short term, I think the owned and operated pay-per-view subscription transaction is a lot more predictable. In the long term, I think it's a hybrid of both, but really welcome your thoughts as well, Richard, and what you're seeing.
I appreciate that, and I completely second everything you just said. There's a lot of change going on in the market, and certainly while some of the ad spend is tightened, there's other brands that are seeing the opportunity in this, in just shifting where those dollars are going. Some of it is sponsorship, some of it is still ad spend, but being able to figure out how that's going to be used is just something that I think all businesses, especially streaming businesses, are going to adapt to as they adapt other parts of their business through this, slightly volatile, certainly uncertain time. So there's not a lot we can do other than be reactionary to the market and be responsive to it in what we can provide and how we provide it. Part of before this happens, we have a technology that allows ad insertion in a different way, much faster, no rebuffering, no interruption. And every time I brought it up, it was like, yeah, that's interesting. But after this has happened, the moment I bring that up on a phone call, it's like, wait a minute, repeat what you just said. You have a broadcast like ad insert. How is that possible? So the focus on even the technology side from advertising has become noticeably different. So I think a lot of businesses, not just producing streams or content providers, are actually focusing on how do we change with this time.
And speaking of that, Richard, one of the things that I found interesting was, the European Union asked Netflix to slow down, to drop from HD to SD, and there's been a move in Latin America to do that. And there's been talk, Facebook doing the same thing. Are we really at risk of having the internet slow down because of Zoom conferences? And I'm throwing this out to everybody.
No, it makes me angry. Everyone says that. Sorry, I've said it.
All right, so please, Dom, go ahead and add your colored perspective to this as part of the non-EU, now that you all have, jumped the tornado, or whatever that term is.
I went and grabbed a bunch of traffic graphs off Links and LunApp, and you're seeing an almost nominal increase in traffic. Yes, people are watching more Netflix in some ways because they've got more time, they're stuck at home, but they're watching it over a much longer period of time. It's not all happening in the peaks in the evenings. I mean, these networks are built for massive peaks for live events. There's no live events happening. There's lots of video conferencing on a small scale, but there's no big sporting events. There's no Premier League football on Amazon. There's nothing like that congesting these networks. So Mark DJ in the chat room's just, I think, joining me on this one as well. It's a myth. The networks are built for huge peaks. The reason, in my opinion, in my humble, uninformed opinion, the reason why the HD streams have been deactivated on Netflix and YouTube and made opt-in, they're not disabled, they're just made opt-in rather than defaults. The reason that's happened is because we've been in a market which is pushing silly myths like 8K to the home over streaming platforms, and that's just a huge expense if you default to it. So why spend the money on something where your consumers are getting no benefit other than saying, oh, look, I've got an 8K TV, but I can't actually see the difference. Just turn it off, save literally 4 or 5 times the traffic in your cost. But in terms of network impact, zilch. Well, not zilch, but you're looking at sort of 2s and 3% in background traffic increase. If you like, I can go and dig the graphs out and put them up on the screen.
Before Richard jumps in, let me just ask this, Dom, though. So I mean, I understand with Netflix, because obviously a lot of that's cached because that's, previously recorded content. But if you get hundreds of thousands of small video conferences like this, which can't be cached, does that not push us to a point where, I mean, we can't take advantage of CDN capability, that kind of thing, in terms of caching? Obviously, Zoom uses SVC, which is a technology that's been around for a decade and everybody ignored, and suddenly it works because of the scalability of it. Are we not, though, running the potential, if we have hundreds of thousands of these going on simultaneously, which can't be cached, to actually raise the floor of what consistent traffic looks like?
Yeah, definitely. There is I'm not denying that there's a nominal increase in the floor, but it's not going to the availability, the latent availability in all these CDNs and network services is many, many times that floor level. So the risk of the networks becoming congested in most situations is almost zero. You've got so much capacity to deal with the peaks, and we are, you know, most CDNs are probably have probably got 5 to 10. I don't know. I'm conjecturing. It's conjecture here, but 5 to 10 times background traffic available for peak. So you've got, you know, if you're only increasing 2 to 3%, maybe 20% on your floor level, you're still way under what your congestion would be at peak. So it is a myth. It is just factually a myth.
I'm gonna agree with both of you, but I'm gonna add something that might change that.
Okay.
And Tim, I think you hit on it too. And obviously pointing the finger at a Netflix or having to reduce their quality when it's an on-demand service. Obviously, on-demand is a file download problem. It fits really well into a CDN type model. What we're seeing right now, though, is a spike in live content, dynamic content. It doesn't work with replication systems or a caching model that you have with CDNs, no matter where you're at in the world. So seeing a spike in that uncacheable content, if you will, for live, both in work and play and having that combined with entertainment, I can see how it can have an effect, but it's not coming from on-demand content. It's coming from the fact that everybody's live. And it's moved the old last mile issue, if you will, not to bring up another phrase from the past. But the last mile had really become, just in the last 5 years, not about the last mile or the curve. It was how many people in your house are streaming Netflix at the same time in different rooms with different shows. That was already an issue. Now it's how many people are live streaming out a Zoom meeting for a class or for business or for, you know, all of these things that we're doing, where all of a sudden everybody is a source and a destination of live content that's not going to play nice with a caching and smart routing system. That definitely, I mean, we're seeing that bandwidth fight in our house every day.
I was gonna say, you're doing a Zoom, but your college age kids could be doing FaceTime to somebody. Or
that's right. They're doing classes. They're doing lectures and meetings in college from home now. And so it's definitely colliding over Wi-Fi, over residential connection, even before we get to, you know, the big hub and spokes of the internet backbone. This is where I'm seeing the bandwidth fight happen.
Interesting. Mark, do you think that, and again, you're out there in the field doing this kind of thing, do you think that we'll see the cost of bandwidth go up as a result of this, whether it's real or hyped, as Dom is saying, you know, potential shortage of bandwidth? Will that affect the cost of what it costs to deliver something, or do you think ultimately this is just a spike that will drop back down and we won't run into this kind of long-term issue?
You talking about ISP bandwidth or CDN bandwidth?
CDN bandwidth.
I don't think so. I think if the conversation turns to that, to Dom's point, the truth will be flushed out, and I don't think there's a basis on which to mount an effort to increase costs on across streaming CDNs specifically. Yeah, I don't see it. And
Okay.
Also, I mean, it really is more on the ISP side that this, if it were true, would be, you know, affected. On the CDN side, like they're not touching any of this traffic. So.
Well, and of course,
sorry, Tim, just to chip in, Mark DeJong is asking Eric to comment, because he believes this is a business problem and not a technical one. And Lenny Ferreira is mentioning that I would say it's more likely Zoom's infrastructure or another tool was not prepared to deal with the spike in demand. So just cutting across you, Tim, there a second. Eric, have you got any thoughts about that as a business challenge rather than a technical one?
Well, I think that's what Mark was just getting at. It's really more of a business challenge right now, and any efforts to claim there is a bandwidth issue on the CDN side would only be would essentially be a red herring. And like Mark said, I think the truth would be exposed fairly quickly. So I'm not seeing it as as much of a business problem either, unless I'm misunderstanding the question.
Well, and I was going to add to Mark's point too, that if it is a end user last mile issue, why are Comcast and Spectrum out there offering free internet connectivity to families who don't have internet but have children at home? I had a conversation with somebody at Spectrum recently, and they said that the demand for that free service for 60 days is overwhelming them. So clearly, from a infrastructure standpoint for an ISP, they don't tend to. It doesn't seem like they're seeing that issue. So I would agree, Eric. I would agree, Mark. I think it is ultimately, and I'm not going to go to Dom's point and say that it's hype or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But I certainly think it's one of those conversations that we may be worrying about something that we don't necessarily need to worry about. Alesandra, do you have any perspective from your standpoint? Obviously, you sort of live between the worlds.
Yeah, we're CDN agnostic and work with multiple CDNs for our customers, and we kind of pass that value down to our customers. We haven't seen anything like that, and I can't really foresee it either. I think it kind of goes against my general ethos on our industry and wanting to support the community and not increase. If there's a water shortage, like, let's not make it more expensive. Like, let's try to help each other out. I'm not seeing it. I don't foresee it, and I don't think it would last long either if it was introduced.
And you're not having CDNs coming to you and saying we're having to raise your price because so many people are doing.
Not at all. And I think I can only speak on behalf of myself and the conversations that I've had. I think we're being even more lenient on wanting to pass along like the best rates that we can.
Okay, and I'm going to I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to segue to a topic that I'll bring back to Dom in a minute. One of the things that Telestream sent out this morning, which is the company that makes Wirecast, is that they are integrated with Zoom. And Dom can talk to that specifically, but I think you mentioned before we went on air that you all are working on trying to do solutions that integrate with Zoom as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we not even formally announced it yesterday, but internally, and I think on LinkedIn, at our CEO announced it or introduced it. So we're able to ingest a stream. So it would be like this Zoom, conference or meeting, and submit that out like as a RTMP feed if you want to have it go across your own website versus having it go across YouTube. If you want to put a paywall on it, if you want to monetize, we see a lot of fitness customers using Zoom as a way to teach their classes and needing to, have authentication. So it's something that we have introduced and have an integration with today. And I'm really excited to see kind of what innovative things our customers create with it.
Nice. So Dom, when we started this, 2.5 years ago, we used something that Google deprecated, which was Google Hangouts. Was that what we started with? Hangouts? Or
we used the first SMAFs we did were with Hangouts live on it. So one of the principles for SMAF was to create a workflow which really had a nominal cost, partly because we wanted to do something which in its own right wasn't commercial, so we can say what the hell we like on our own stream without being beholden to any sponsors apart from our fellow hosts and dear guests. We started off with Hangouts live on air. I had a bit of a desperate enthusiasm to add the scrolling ticker, which you can't see on the conference call here, but you can see on the YouTube output, which grabbed our headline feed and put it on. It just gave us a bit of branding and so on.
And you're doing that through Wirecast, correct?
So what happened was, first of all, we moved so Hangouts live on air worked in its own right, but wouldn't let me put a ticker in. So we then started started screen grabbing the one YouTube feed, adding a layer, and then putting another one out. And in effect, that's what we're still doing. So I switch my camera so you can see the setup. So basically, I'm running Wirecast on this machine, and this desktop over here on the right is just sat in the Zoom conference. That's basically screen grabbing into Wirecast. And so that's the easy way to do on the production side to do the integration. In fact, what we've been using between when Hangouts live on air stopped being commercially offered as a service, And today I put together an open source conference server platform, which was great. But to be honest, I don't need to spend all the time and effort supporting and tinkering with that to do it. And I could drop the ticker, and we could go directly to YouTube from Zoom as well. Which might be a sort of, if Tim, myself, Eric, and Mark are all, say, at Streaming Media doing a SMAF after party such as the one that we shall never mention again, Richard. If we were doing an event like that, then we could just go straight off.
Michelle's laughing off the side here because she was at that after party and remembers exactly what you were
I thought it was pretty epic.
It was an epic party, and we will hopefully be doing something like that again on the anniversary of it in June. But more to be announced on that soon.
So tell us real quick about, first of all, I wanted to say that shot that you showed us there of your studio reminded me of the BBC interview that was done where they showed you in that almost exact same spot.
Yeah, it was. I had to film it myself and send it because the BBC camera guys aren't allowed to go visiting anyone at the moment. I had to film it myself and then send it to them as a file. So I stuck my Mevo camera up over next to that, over in the same angle, and yeah, it was quite a bit of fun actually. It was good.
Nice. So what's the telescreen integration? Sorry, Wirecast.
There isn't one. It's just a screen capture. I think it's a bit. It's like, and respect to them for saying that, because you can do fun things. Like for my DJing later, I'll be doing stuff like this. So you can really mix the effects up by pushing stuff through Wirecast. It's an absolutely brilliant, really simple to use tool. You can do the same thing with OBS as well, which is free. So there's different ways to do this type of integration, but it's not really tightly integrated. It's screen capturing, and there's some other platforms which are like the people selling traffic. There's people kind of opportunizing on the COVID situation to try to jump into the fear and panic and say we can solve your problems, and you know what? Actually, you're kind of making a bit of noise where I don't think it's completely appropriate. But
okay.
But it's it works. It's good. It can smarten up your streams.
Good. All right. So we're down to about the last 8 minutes here, and what we typically do, or what we've typically done in the past, it seems everything's changed in the last few months. But what we've typically done in the past is spent about a minute and a half on each person on what they're planning to do in the next month between now and the next SMAF. Stay at home, I think, will probably be the #1 answer if we were playing Family Feud. Or it should be the #1 answer. But I'm going to go ahead and start with our guests. And let's say, rather than just what are you going to do in the next month, what do you expect to see in the next, let's take it to the end of the year. We get past this potentially, and the industry says, okay, now it's time to have IBC, or it's time to have some other event. What will we be looking at our lessons that we've learned from this? And Alesandra, I'll start with you.
Oh, the $1 million question. I mean, through the end of the year, I'm looking at this like day by day, honestly. But I think, for the next month and a half, myself and our team are really bullish on serving the industries that we can, and helping where we can, so that when we do get out of this, business can kind of run as usual and have streaming be integral part of that for these customers, that's reliable and can remain. Personally, I'm really focused on our partnerships, and I'm really excited to have some announcements come in the next month. So a lot of things to do from both the Zype side of things, women in streaming side of things. We're looking to have our first virtual women in streaming event globally, which is gonna be awesome. So a lot going on for me in the next month, and through the end of the year, I hope to see you guys at IBC. I mean, I miss my people. I'm very much an extrovert. I hope I'm handshaking, hugging, and kind of grabbing coffees and cocktails like usual.
All right, sounds good. Richard, what about you?
I completely concur with Alesandra. There's going to be a lot of pent up demand here for human contact in person. While remote meetings are great for continuing productivity and helping with sanity and almost even normalcy, we're looking forward to certainly getting back out there. We've tried our best to adapt sales calls to be remote. Luckily, we're in the business of selling streaming technology, so it lends itself to that, and we're just making changes. At the same time, we're bringing on additional bandwidth, human bandwidth, to be able to continue to contribute and help in these other areas that we weren't expecting to be what March and April are, became and are becoming. And we expect, though, that that'll be part of the norm going forward for some period of time. And for as long as we can help, we'll continue to try and do that without having it impact our larger accounts. But that's going to be our focus, is just trying to keep up with the demand for these new ways to use this technology while we continue forward with the business.
And I know my son was set to graduate this year from college, and his university, he's an RA, resident, in one of the dorms. They're talking about, do we do a commencement in August at the beginning of the next school year for those who don't get a chance to march? I know you have college age kids as well, and that's certainly one of those things that we have to remember. There are events. I mean, Michelle and I sort of make light of the thing with our wedding, but that was fairly traumatic to have to go from 155 people down to 10. Ultimately, we had the event then. The other option would have been to push it out further. I think we have that human element, not just of contact, but also of things that we do as rituals that are really important, that we have to figure out whether those get offset or whether those get canceled, so to speak. Are you seeing clients who are saying we want to postpone things as opposed to canceling? And I'm sorry, I know I'm taking a little bit more time with you.
No problem at all. We don't have any big cancellations. All the cancellations that we've seen are specific to trade related and conferences, as opposed to a lot of the incoming work we're seeing are, how do we continue to connect regardless of not doing it in person? So it's really about just behavior change, but not necessarily business change. Okay. So that's why we're doing our best to try and keep up and help where we can to keep that normalcy in business, not just in life, in any way that we can help with that.
All right, Mark, what about you? What do you see over the next 6 to 9 months?
Well, to your point,
having a lot more time with the littles.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, I'm trying to get as much of that as possible these days. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think that's the the choice that a lot of companies are making right now, especially in the entertainment and sports space. Is, do we cancel stuff or do we postpone stuff? Entire sports seasons really can't be postponed, but things like movie premieres that we have some stuff to do with, those can easily be postponed and have been postponed. So we're expecting to see a really solid, Q3, Q4 this year, like, way higher than normal revenues, just because all of the stuff that was supposed to happen this quarter and last quarter is going to move. But there have been quite a few things that have been canceled or replaced with virtual events, some of them very, very large scale. So right now, like I mentioned, we're just working on creating solutions for that type of opportunity, and I'd say over the next 30 days we'll have some stuff in place and some announcements coming out, and that's what we're focused on primarily at this point, is trying to make this all easier for all of our customers.
And you anticipate pent-up demand from what you were saying there too, as we go into Q3 and Q4?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of our entertainment customers are just kind of sitting on their hands, waiting for word as to when we can start kind of planning again. But hopefully we're looking at maybe mid Q3 and into Q4 is when everything will come to fruition, and we'll start seeing all these postponed events actually happening.
Got it. Eric, what about you? What are you seeing over the next 6 to 9 months?
Well, we are, as of today, StreamingMedia East is still scheduled for June 1st through the 3rd in Boston. All I can say about that is check the website soon. Stay tuned for a little more information there. Soon we'll be announcing that we are planning on doing StreamingMedia West at Huntington Beach again. this year. The beginning of October is the plan for that. Other than that, since everyone else got a personal plug in, I'm going to be a grandfather in July.
Woo!
So
awesome.
I know you're saying he doesn't look that old, and I'm not, but
I wasn't saying that at all. I was like, it's about time.
What
Right.
camera are you using? I need that camera.
Yeah, right. So that's what we've got going on here. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting few months. I mean, I was going to talk about some, let's just end it on a positive note. I'll leave it there.
All right. Sounds good. Dominic, back to you.
Huntington Beach and a grandfather in one single camera shot there, Eric. Top marks. So that's double good news. Brilliant. So what are we doing? 9 months out. So there's a bunch of stuff I can see is going to happen. I think if I was going to spread a conspiracy theory, I think COVID was probably invented by a streaming engineer, because I think this has just absolutely seeded our industry in a way, in the layman's mind, in a way that suddenly stops me being a niche innovator and geek, and suddenly makes me useful to community. Which is really cool. So I think this is a real coming of age moment for a lot of things going on in the streaming space.
To a certain extent, Dom, it's almost now, if you say I work in streaming, it's what it used to be when you 20 years ago would say I work in computers and everybody would stop you and ask you questions. Now when you say I work in streaming, they have all sorts of questions beyond just stand on my head and do that.
And as long as it's not installing webcams, I'm usually quite interested in helping people. But no, my mum needs to work out how to install her own webcams. But but the other things that I think are going to be interesting. So I think the sports sector, we've got some significant sports clients, and they're I think they're in a bit of a world of pain from their field ops side. But one thing that is interesting is I think the core engineering teams are feeling like the pressures or the day-to-day operational pressures are backed off a little bit, so they can sit down and finish those core infrastructure projects that they've been having to shelve because they're interrupted every day by field ops type things. So I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation of core projects, completion of projects which are taking a long time. You guys have obviously got Peacock coming up over the summer, and I think that's going to be a reasonably interesting story. Although I find it interesting that today on SMAF is the first day that we haven't mentioned Disney for maybe a year, and that's interesting because only 2 weeks ago Disney Plus launched in Europe, and it was about as exciting as eggs boiling. So that was kind of a year ago. If that had happened without COVID, that's all we would have had to talk about this week. That's so true. I find it interesting that it's even not come until
I'll add to that, Dom, that one of the things there, remember we've talked about, is essentially the price point they set in the US was a loss leader price point to get people to think about the parks. You can't go to the parks. So it will be interesting to see if they have to shift the model and raise the price on streaming, because it was ultimately a loss leader for them.
Well, Sky Sports over here is refunding subscriptions while there's no sports on and stuff. So that's going to hurt. There's some stuff like that going on. I think we're going to see a rash of high finance startups coming from Silicon Valley, which are going to try to take Zoom out of the market. And they're probably the only differentiator will be that they'll be American and secure rather than Chinese and not secure. But I think they'll all go bust by Christmas, because I think the world doesn't need another half a dozen video conferencing applications. I think it needs people who can use the few that are out there properly. And I think people will start to socialize online in a way that we may have been doing with the Thursday Night Show for 8 years, but instead of just being ultra geek, I think people will start hanging out using tools like Zoom. And I've already seen lots of people starting up quiz groups and evening entertainment chats and that sort of stuff. And I think we'll see new formats and new content models coming off the back of that. If people can get together with 100 people in a Zoom chat room or whatever it may be and run a quiz show, well, that's as good as any TV quiz show used to be. So I think we're going to see totally new formats emerging from this at last, because the creatives, not just the techies, are going to be playing with this technology and having ideas, and I think that's really exciting. So
that really is. And I'm gonna put a plug in for one other thing real quick. I just helped launch a survey on professional services and whether companies need professional services during these times on Wowza. If anybody would like to go give their feedback on that. What I'm finding intriguing is, you know, Dom, you mentioned that you get all those requests from people to help. But ultimately, I'm not necessarily seeing that that's converting into a whole lot of pay me for this. Richard mentioned the model of companies coming to them because they're essentially, you know, or what Alesandra was saying, where it's, you know, it's your own platform, branded platform. But in terms of getting people to help set those things up, I'm not necessarily saying that there's a significant uptick in that. I'm hoping there will be, because it seems like people do need professional help. But anyway, I'd love some feedback on that survey at wowza.com as well.
Well, we're actually, I've let us all run over a few seconds, so we're 6 minutes over. There's still people burbling in the chat room. Mark's saying he reckons there's going to be more esports, and congratulations on being a grandpa to Eric as well. So like to keep these things human. I think with that, I'm just going to whip round and say thank yous to everyone. So first and most importantly, our guest, Alesandra, thank you very much. If you wave, they won't see you, so I'm going to have to. There we go.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and happy to continue any part of this conversation with you guys, anyone watching on the YouTube link at all.
Perfect. And Richard, likewise, thank you to you.
It's always a pleasure to get together with the SMAF team, and I'm not just referring to the last SME at all. I always enjoy the conversation.
Excellent. And to the new granddaddy, Eric.
Hey, thanks everyone. Looking forward to talking again next month.
Perfect. And Mark, really good to have you back on air, and you're not looking that tired, which is awesome.
People keep saying that. It must be the camera. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as always, and stay safe, everybody.
It's the camera or the creams, I reckon. And Tim, Michelle, congratulations again on your wedding in the last few weeks, and we'll catch up with you guys soon too.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed being on here today.
And I think I have to end with the JPEG that Mark's just sent me here, because this just made me laugh a lot. And with that, I will be saying, with that, we'll see you next month. Watch out for the first Thursday.